It's the Locked On Flyers podcast here with your 2025 NHL trade deadline recap show, including sending Scott Laughton to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
A busy day.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's special episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And to keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can follow us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials. And of course, find us here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Busy day for the Flyers at the NHL trade deadline, although it wasn't the busiest in the NHL. We'll get to some of the bigger stories from the NHL trade deadline later in the show, but we have to start with the Philadelphia Flyers. And of course, the biggest story of the day was sending Scott Laughton to the Toronto Maple Leafs, plus a 4th and 6th round pick. We haven't gotten the official release yet as of recording in terms of what year those are, but that is the big deal. In return, we got Nikita Grebyankin, who is a forward currently with the Toronto Marlies, and a 2027 first round pick from the Leafs that is top 10 protected. So, Danny Briere said all along that he wanted a first round pick in return for Scott Laughton, and that's what he got. So do you have to grade him on a curve on this one or give him a star because he got what he wanted?
No, I give him a star. I mean, again, with the prospect, I honestly have never seen him play, so I can't tell you anything about him. It's hard to track every prospect. I always say that.
Right.
But as far as getting the first, no, that's good. I mean, I think, we talked about it. Like, this was going to be the time to trade Laughton. I was saying last night on Press Row, like, you don't know if he'll be hurt next year. You don't know what's going to happen. And so This was, right moment. Definitely the market went up a little bit. Yeah, again, this wasn't like a steal of a deal because, the Leafs didn't give away a top prospect. They saved that for a later deal.
Right.
And you're one of their top prospects. So, yeah, I think he did fine.
Right. And I think as far as the salary retention goes, it's not bad either because, Laughton makes so little money overall that 1.5, okay.
Right.
That's fine. Does not matter in the grand scheme of things there. And, I think we had said we want a 2026 or 2027 pick as well. And that's what we got. We got the 2027 pick, which I think is fine. And I think, we'll see what Grebyankin has to offer. My understanding is that he's a checking kind of guy. He's a bigger guy.
That's what I hear too.
Yeah, he was a 5th round pick for the Leafs in 2022. And with the Marlies this year in the AHL, he's got 9 goals and 12 assists in 39 games. And so for a guy that's not really a scorer per se, to get those kind of numbers in the AHL, that's fine. And, we'll see what he can do. I hope he starts with the Phantoms.
He should.
Here. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, but that's another reason they probably had to get him on the roster because today is the clear day roster for the Phantoms. So that's a big deal.
Well, speaking of that, the Flyers also sent Alexei Kolosov down to the Phantoms officially. And it seems like from reports that he's going to play for the Phantoms. We don't have that 100% guaranteed, but that is what people are saying.
But he might just play for the playoffs. It might just be a paper move, and he might just keep collecting NHL money until the playoffs and then play.
That's correct. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's it is very, very possible that it is the paper move, given that it is the transaction day that we just talked about, right? So to be determined on that front. The Phantoms are in Charlotte this weekend, playing on Saturday and Sunday. We will report back on that on Phantoms Tuesday when we get back to the regular programming next week. The Flyers also sent Andrei Kuzmenko to the LA Kings for a 2027 third round pick. The Flyers are retaining 50%, but again, that's just this year.
Right.
So not a big deal. They were already paying him to begin with, so you might as well pay half of that for the next, month and a half or whatever. I think it was very interesting that they decided to flip him. I think getting a third for him in return is a fantastic return. It doesn't really matter what year it was. Just gain an asset that's a third round pick or higher is always a good thing.
Yeah, I just think this is where they didn't tell everybody the truth because they were like, well, we wanted to possibly look at him over the summer. Now we got to look. They didn't look at him for very long.
I know. Yeah, that's kind of the asterisk here. You're like,
Yes.
Didn't really give him a shot here to prove himself and maybe earn a spot on the roster for next year. But
Right.
okay.
Hey,
it's
fine.
not like we're attached to him at
No,
this point, right?
No.
And again, the return was fine.
Trade a Russian, get a Russian. Okay.
Get a Russian. Yeah, that's just how it works, I guess, with the Flyers these days. The other move was, I think, doing Erik Johnson a real solid. So happy for him. He's going to go back to the Colorado Avalanche, his true home, one would say, and maybe he'll get a chance to play, maybe not, but the Avs are certainly all in, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but him being able to be a part of that is a really nice thing for the Flyers to do.
Yeah, he'll probably be a scratch most of the time. He's a just-in-case guy for them because of their roster. But, hey, he knows those guys. He won a cup there. Good for him.
Yeah, really, really happy for him. So in terms of the overall trade deadline grade here, given that it appears the Flyers have kept Rasmus Ristolainen on the roster, and, we had said find the right deal and trade one of them, but don't compromise on both of them. And if they were going to keep one of them, they should keep Ristolainen because he is a very good defenseman and he'll be good to have around for the next little bit. And it seems like that's what took place.
I'm going to give him a B- because I think based on the defenseman and what the returns were, I would have tried to do that Risto deal first, keep the Leafs on the hook until the last minute, knowing that they were desperate for a center and like Laughton. That's the way I would have done it. That's okay. But that's why I give him a B- and not an A.
Yeah, that's fair. I think so. The market was absolutely insane. Like people were paying insane prices. So they probably could have gotten a lot for Rasmus Ristolainen, but we'll see how things develop in terms of how long he sticks around. Maybe they trade him next year.
Like once Carlo went, that told me that Risto wasn't going anywhere because they could have just packaged Risto with Laughton and gotten a third team involved perhaps to wash some of the money.
Yeah, I believe that's entirely possible. Now, we could sort of telegraph this because Scott Laughton was kept out of practice and Ristolainen was not. So I think that is really what the tell was here, how it was. Well,
it's the tell to play it safe, but you know how trade deadline day is, things can break down. Like it's not a guarantee. It was just a tell like, hey, he might get traded, but I still wasn't 100% definitive because I've seen trades break down.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess up next is like, now what, right? For the Flyers, now that they've done this, what are the next steps? And for me, that is having a couple strategic call-ups from the Phantoms, like we've been talking about, to replace those players. I hope Grabyankin starts with the Phantoms and then earns a call-up if it is so deemed, right?
Yeah, let him go down there for a few weeks and let him adjust. That's fine. You do need to make some call-ups. Emil Andre should be called up right away. You could call up Ole Lixell or somebody else, and that's what they should do. These guys, and not just to call up and scratch. These guys need to play now. Like they need to play real roles with real minutes so you can see what you have in them. Otherwise, that's a big thing.
I would call up Abels and prospect that we need to give experience to and really suss out. We can't really do that with Tuamala because he's been hurt, But if you bring back up Jacob Gaucher, I wouldn't complain. If you brought back Ole Lixell, I wouldn't
I think it
complain.
should all rotate in the next few weeks. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. All right, that is the day for the Philadelphia Flyers. A lot of other teams were busy. We're going to talk about the highlights of that day coming up next.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you get a win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right. So there were two big questions. I think there were many big questions, but the two biggest questions in my eyes coming into the trade deadline is what's going to happen with Mikko Rantanen and is Brad Marchand going to get traded, right?
Right.
So both of those things happened. Mikko Rantanen went to Dallas. The contract extension was the big sticking point, but he got to go to a state with no income tax.
That makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference. I saw it calculated. It was over $4 million over the life of the contract, which is a big, big deal. And in return, Carolina got Logan Stankoven and 2 firsts, which is a haul.
It's a haul.
So that was the
It doesn't
price
help
to
him for
pay.
the playoffs that much other than
Nope.
Stankoven, but okay.
Yeah, I think, it's been a rough day for Carolina.
Carolina, yeah, you got to be scratching your head a little bit if you're a fan.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be real tough going, especially the way the East is right now for them to even have a shot at getting to the conference championship, let alone the cup final here. And then Brad Marchand is a Florida Panther.
Like I always say, Rachel, people go to Florida to retire. So,
They do. They do. And
he's not what he used to be. He'll be effective in the playoffs and in the role he plays. He could score some goals, but his numbers have been dropping.
Yes, they have been. And so this is definitely a rental for the playoffs, and we'll see what happens with the Panthers in their attempt to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. But those were the biggest stories of the day. I think, we talked about Erik Johnson going back to Colorado. It is very clear that the Colorado Avalanche are all in. They traded for Brock Nelson, which we talked about that emotional roller coaster for Nelson in terms of his leaving the Islanders, his only
Callum
home.
Ritchie's a heck of a return for the Islanders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's an excellent prospect there. And the Isles flipped Shillington to the Ducks for future considerations.
That's fine. He'll probably do well there because the Ducks know how to handle defensemen. He could play a role for sure.
He can. It's just rough for him getting tossed around like that. But, as we talked about, they got Ryan Lindgren earlier, and they made a deal with the Bruins, getting Charlie Coyle. Like, this team is all in.
They are. I mean, and it's not like I try to tell people, Casey Mittelstadt's a good player. They didn't trade Casey Mittelstadt because he stinks. They traded Casey Mittelstadt because
you have to give to get.
Well, and they also have other players like Drouin, and they have some guys that aren't the biggest guys. You going into the playoffs, you need a bigger, rough and tumble kind of guy, and Coyle is that. And so I think with designs on the Stanley Cup, that's what they're doing. And honestly, I don't care what FanDuel or any other place has. I would still put Colorado ahead of Dallas for cup chances. That's me.
I might too. I think you might be right there. Now, the Winnipeg Jets, I think, tried and maybe got their second choices in a lot of situations here. So they got Luke Schenn and Brandon Tanev, which is good, but not great.
Well, the funny thing about the Luke Schenn thing is, when Luke Schenn got traded to the Penguins, Mike Sullivan had this glowing quote about him, like, hey, he's a great guy, great character guy. The young players are going to really have a great time with him. He's going to be a good influence, that kind of thing. And what did he may have had a chance to eat dinner with him once. I'm not sure he even had a time for that. So that's just funny how that worked out.
Yeah. And then the other team that I think, made a big move that it was kind of borderline, not a, front running contender, is the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
In that huge deal with the Sabres. And, the Sens got Dylan Cousins and another player in Dennis Gilbert. And I think they're going to try and make a run for the playoffs here.
Yeah, they are, and they got Fabian Zetterlund in another deal, right? So I like what they've done. I think Cousins, though, as a center, his offense hasn't been good, but everything else has been good. If they can get more offense out of him, they'll be good. Josh Norris is the better player in that trade. He
Right.
does have shoulder injuries, and he has missed time for sure. But he's the more talented guy, and if he's back, like he has, I think, 20 goals right now, something like that. If he's back, Buffalo did fine in this. So we'll see. Like that's just one of those kind of wait and see ones, but they were going to, at some point they were going to deal Cousins. Like we all knew that.
Right. And, we saw Florida kind of do moves incrementally. So they didn't have a big splash on deadline day other than the Marchand deal, which I guess is big.
Right.
But they've been kind of slowly trying to build around what they have in order to try and repeat there. But, then I think the sellers are the other big story here.
Yes.
And I think the Bruins obviously were big sellers. They sent Brazeau to the Minnesota Wild. We talked about the Avalanche deal. They sent Brandon Carlo to the Leafs. So that was a huge deal.
Huge deal. Look, but we talked about it, what they get Fraser Minton, right? That's a heck of a young player. I would look at it like this. I think Will Zellers is a guy that few are talking about because they probably haven't seen him play, but he's a kid from Shattuck who could score. And he was a throw-in on a deal too. And so I think the Bruins did well. I do. I think nobody's going to cry any tears in the audience here on a Flyers show for the Bruins. And most people around the league wouldn't do it. I was on another show. No. Nobody on the panel would. That's just the way it is. But I think Sweeney deserves some credit. I think he did what he had to do, and it took guts to do it. Because he could have hung on based on the points that they have, right? And said, well, we're trying. Yeah. But he did the right thing.
Yeah. And I think, like, for me, I'm mentally comparing what the Rangers did and what the Sharks have done, because I think the Rangers were smart sellers and the Sharks were indiscriminate sellers.
Right. Yeah. Zetterlund, I was told by Max Miller that he was having some contract issues. They were trying to sign him. And I remember thinking he could get traded, but I guess contract issues probably just broke down, but that's what happens. As far as the Rangers, it's weird though, because Soucy is more of a playoff performer than a regular season guy. Like he's a pretty good shutdown guy, but he's not fast. And so like, I kind of think like the Rangers might actually think they're going to make the playoffs. I really don't think they're going to make it. And so, yeah, their defense, and they re-signed Vakanainen, like, the top of their defense is really good. The rest is kind of mediocre, to be honest.
Right. And that's why
I was really good. 3, okay.
Yeah, I think it felt like to me the Rangers were doing a repositioning that would give them an outside shot, but they weren't trying necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And there was all this JJ Peterka stuff, which I never really took any stock in, to be honest.
No. And then, you look at a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins, who kind of did some moves at the periphery, but didn't do anything big at the core.
No, we talked about the Shen possibility of getting flipped, and we would kind of see what the Penguins were up to. Well, they were up to getting more picks. Kyle Dubas got 2 more picks in that deal. So that was smart. And so, yeah, I think Dubas is doing what he can. He added some young talent. He's got a boatload of picks. And now the pressure will be on him to kind of like, keep the boat afloat while you're trying to make it better. They're just not going to allow a rebuild. That's not his fault.
Yeah, I think so. And then I think one of the other interesting kind of non-stories is Montreal staying put and re-signing their guys.
Yeah, since I write for the Hockey News about Montreal, I had written a lot about this. But on this show, I haven't talked about it because it's a Flyers show. What I would say is if this were Philly and Ken Hughes did this in Philly, if they were 1 point out, I still think there would be criticism. In Montreal, there's no criticism. It's kind of like, yeah, Ken Hughes knows what he's doing. It's okay. I don't think it's okay. I don't think they're making the playoffs. I don't think their goaltending is good enough. And David Savard would have been a great guy to have on the market. He's a UFA. So are you really going to sign him next year? He's 34 years old, and you're going to let him walk to or get like a 6th round pick at the draft. That's crazy. Armia makes a lot of money, so I get why maybe you weren't going to be able to deal him, but they have cap room. They could have retained it. Like they could have weaponized their cap space like Danny Briere did. They didn't do any of that. They think, and this is where I think it's a misnomer. They think by being in quote unquote the playoff hunt, it will help their players and give them more experience. Well, if that were true, then the Flyers would be making the playoffs this year, and instead they might be worse off for points than they were last year, even though they were in that hunt. That's why I don't believe in it. I've seen it firsthand. If you make the playoffs, hey, different story, whole different story.
Yeah, I think so. But any other highlights of trade deadline day for you?
I'm trying to think. I mean, there was always, always those rumors, and I wanted to kind of see, I'll be honest. I was thinking 70-30 on Danny not doing it just because things weren't happening. They played in the game, but, then things changed a little in the morning. So I think the Flyers did most of what I thought they would, but not everything. So, that was, we talked about that. I think that, the biggest shocker was that the Bruins totally dismantled their team. I think when they saw with McAvoy out that was the route, and to trade with the Leafs, to trade Carlo to them is kind of crazy because he's got term left, but I guess the Bruins don't expect to be good for at least 2 or 3 years, so they don't care. And so that to me was a little shocking. I don't think I expected them to completely dismantle like that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. All right. That will do it for our trade deadline recap. We'll have more on the trade deadline and its aftermath on our Monday show. Plus, we'll recap the weekend back-to-back against the Kraken and the Devils. I can't believe there's hockey so quickly. There's even games tonight.
You can't even react. Like, it's just
boom, just got to keep going. Keep going. All right. That'll do it for this special episode. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.